Going Beyond is a presentation of Beyond Housing, helping entire communities become better places to live with RareGem Productions. Reliance Bank is the proud sponsor of today's Going Beyond program. Let Reliance Bank help you get what you need from your bank. Phone number 314-569-7200 or find Reliance Bank online at reliancebankstl.com. Reliance Bank.
Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
We're going beyond.
Today on Going Beyond,
we continue the conversation about the Normandy School District.
We are to learn from our past. In that sense, we don't ignore it. We learn from it, but our focus and our energy and our passion has to be for the future. And it has to be to work within the construct of what's been mandated, if you will.
Right.
Because the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is in charge of education in the state of Missouri. And the Normandy School District, soon to be called the Normandy Schools Collaborative, if everything proceeds the way Desi says, they are in charge of that district. They are in charge of how the education is provided for our 4,000 or 3,000 students, however many it ends up being.
Join me as I have Miss Monica Huddleston, a task force member and the mayor of the city of Greendale, on the show. Beyond Housing is going beyond.
That and more ahead today on Going Beyond with Chris Krehmeyer, right after this. Reliance Bank is focused on meeting the banking needs of the entire St. Louis community. That's because Reliance Bank, unlike the big national banks, is locally owned and operated. It's run by people you know, and that's important when you're looking for a personal checking account that's really free, a mortgage, or a loan for your business. So stop in and introduce yourself at one of their 20 branches throughout the St. Louis area. Reliance Bank, making money a little friendlier.
Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Divine Design Hosiery presents its 10-year anniversary concert featuring Donnie Peoples. Saturday, June 28th, 6:30 p.m. at Friendly Temple Missionary Baptist Church, 5515 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive in St. Louis, with special guest Greg Heavy Guitar Hayes, Jewel and Converted, and Cheryl Brown. Come celebrate Divine Design's 10-year anniversary concert featuring Dottie Peoples live. Saturday, June 28th at Friendly Temple Missionary Baptist Church. A portion of the proceeds will benefit the community Women Against Hardship. Tickets can be purchased at Friendly Temple Missionary Baptist Church, Transformation Christian Bookstore, Drop Shop Beauty Salon, Rib Shack Downtown, Afro World, and the Community Women Against Hardship. Or call 1-800-518-9646. 1-800-518-9646. Or go to www.divinedzion.com.
RareGem Productions proudly presenting the positive.
I am Monica Huddleston, mayor of the city of Greendale, and I believe in good leadership. Good leadership is serving your community. Others will follow if they see a good example in you actually serving as you lead with that title. It's all about service, and I do believe in going beyond.
We're going beyond. Welcome to this edition of Going Beyond. I'm your host, Chris Krehmeyer, President and CEO of Beyond Housing. And today we're going to talk about the continuing saga of the Normandy School District. As you've been following the news, I assume lots of things have been happening. But one of the things we're going to focus on today's show is the task force that was created by the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the recommendations that they gave to the department. And the department has now given their thoughts about what could happen next with the school district. Joining me on today's show is a member of the task force, a mayor of the city of Greendale, a longtime community leader, Miss Monica Huddleston. Monica, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. Glad to be here.
So even the setup is long and complicated. There's a lot of different moving parts. There's a lawsuit that was just been filed. So we're not going to touch any of that. What we're here really to make sure is people understand the recommendations that the task force put together. And then maybe, Monica, just do a little bit of a setup of the task force members and kind of what its charge was from the state.
Well, the task of the Transition Task Force, which is what we were called, was to recommend a path forward or a plan forward, suggestions, recommendations for the future of the Normandy School District only if the district were to lapse. And, of course, that has happened now. So we were to assume that the district was lapsed and what would we recommend for the district going forward. That was our charge. There were 9 of us on the task force. It was appointed by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Commissioner Dr. Krishna Castro is in charge of the task force in that sense. And she gave us our charge personally in our first meeting, and then we took it from there. We had 9 of us on the task force. It was chaired by Dr. Carol Basile, who is the dean of the University of Missouri St. Louis School of Education. And there were others on the task force as well. I don't know if you want me to name them, but
no, I think that there was an important mix of, there were some former Normandy grads, some folks whose names in the community, like Steve Cousins, prominent attorney at Armstrong Teasdale, former school board member of Normandy, and clearly a respected leader in the region, to some education folks, to a parent, Marla Smith, both a parent and a council member in the city of Pagedale, was around the table. Wayne Good, longtime, again, Normandy advocate. So you had, quite frankly, a very good mix of people. And then you had private sector folks like Maxine Clark, the founder and CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshops. You had a lot of people who care about education, who care about this community. So I think it was
also.
I don't think anybody could point fingers at. It was a group that was designed to only do what the state wanted to do. It was some very thoughtful folks who care about the community.
That is correct. Also in Bill Douthit, who has his own education consulting firm, and also Charles Pearson, same kind of thing, all very involved and connected to education, particularly black urban education, which is even more important to have folks who had background in that and understanding of all the nuances of that. So I do indeed think that it was a good mix, and everybody's commitment was obvious. The care and concern was obvious. There were some differences of opinion, of course, but for the most part, we were able to come to consensus on most of our recommendations.
And again, so the process, you had several public meetings where you brought in lots of different folks, me included, the superintendent, and a whole host of other people to ask questions and to gather more information, to understand what's going on currently, to understand a whole host of things to help inform your recommendations back to the state. So it was a very, again, from an outsider, it seemed like a very thorough and thoughtful process to gather as much information as you could in a short period of time.
It was an 8-week period, which is very abbreviated for something this complicated and this difficult.
Just fixing public education, that's all.
Right. And we know the background and the history here in Missouri particularly. So we brought in experts. We had conference calls with experts who had done study after study, years and years in the making, of different urban education environments and situations, things that had worked, things that have not worked. We talked with a couple of current school board members, so there was not any attempt to ignore anyone that was involved in the current situation, nor people who had other situations, charter school folks. We also talked with folks like that. So there were inside and outside folks that we discussed things with, and we came up with some pretty basic recommendations. The first of which was that the elected school board would not be reseated in its entirety, that at most one or two elected school board members would be a part of a new joint executive governing board, which would be appointed by DESE, the Department of Education and Secondary Education, but in consultation with others.
And the important part about that is that model is a bit of a hybrid, because historically there's either been a fully elected board, or what the state has done with Riverview Gardens and the city of St. Louis is to put in a state-appointed board, that there is no local representation on the governing body of the district.
That is correct.
So again, seemingly kind of a pragmatic, kind of a newer version to say, community voice is important, but there also needs to be some other folks around the table to help move a district like Normandy, who's been provisional for almost 20 years and has been struggling for many years, to really accelerate the turn in getting better.
That's right, because whatever the future situation is going to be, or whatever the Joint Executive Governing Board discusses or talks about or starts to envision for the district, it is important to have the continuity of the current school board members. They have the history of the district. They have information on what has been actually tried and done, what did work and did not work for the time that they were on the board. That voice is critically important. So I hope that DESE will accept that recommendation from us, is to have at least one or two members of the school board on there. It's still DESE's call what they end up doing, but we hope that they will listen to that particular recommendation.
And you and I have had this conversation. I know others have, and I think sometimes I think it just bears repeating. A little bit of everybody can raise their hand and say, I didn't do enough to make sure the kids in Normandy get the best education possible, particularly over this last 20-year window. So there's enough blame to go around for everybody. So, I know you and I are of like mind that we want to look forward and not backward. And again, the kids in Normandy deserve us to pay attention to their future and not worry about the past. So.
They absolutely do. We are to learn from our past. In that sense, we don't ignore it. We learn from it, but our focus and our energy and our passion has to be for the future. And it has to be to work within the construct of what's been mandated, if you will.
Right.
Because the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is in charge of education in the state of Missouri. And the Normandy School District, soon to be called the Normandy Schools Collaborative, if everything proceeds the way Desi says, they are in charge of that district. They are in charge of how the education is provided for our 4,000 or 3,000 students, however many it ends up being.
So one recommendation was this kind of hybrid board. Some of the other recommendations?
Other recommendations were particularly for the wraparound services. And what I mean by that, and you're very familiar with that, but perhaps the listeners are not, that in our footprint of the Normandy School District are 24 municipalities of varying socioeconomic factors and impacts and things that govern how the children and their families can make it or not make it in this life. And there are plenty of families who simply do not have the financial resources, do not have health insurance, do not have all kinds of resources that typically middle-class families, if you will, would have. So the children of those families come to school without some of the basics that some of the more successful children in our area have. And we want to make sure that we are equipping the children and their families. Important to have their families be integrally involved in their education. We want them to have those resources. So organizations like Beyond Housing and other organizations that have offered their support to the district, we hope will provide things like the healthcare services, the counseling services, the early childhood education type services. Even though Normandy School District, even the new environment, has an early childhood education center, but it's not big enough to take care of all the children in the Normandy footprint.
It serves less than 100 kids.
There you go.
And there's about 2,000 kids who are in a licensed pre-K, and probably another 800 in unlicensed pre-K.
And that is one of the longer term recommendations that we made in the task force, is that the children of the Normandy footprint have come to kindergarten behind already.
Yep.
In vocabulary, in identification of colors, and some of the most basic things that your children or my children would know when they came to kindergarten. But a lot of our children don't. So what we have asked the state is to change this whole battle in this state of not having mandatory preschool or early childhood education for children. That is the only way we're going to stem the tide out into the future of having kids behind when they get to school.
Yep.
That's something we can fix. But the state of Missouri has to decide that it is a priority, and we have to fund it. And they have not, up to now, been willing to do that. There's a new bill that might fund some more of it, but nowhere near enough.
So. We should keep our fingers crossed. Right, wraparound services, pre-K delivery, a hybrid board. What else did the task force recommend?
The other recommendations revolve around professional development for the teachers and administrators. As you know, with the lapse, the contracts of the current teachers and administrators will lapse as well. So the superintendent and his staff will have to determine who will be retained in the school district. And whoever is retained in the school district as teachers, as administrators, as other staff, needs to be properly trained. The professional development has to be there. It has to be funded, and the time has to be allotted for it.
And again, I think, the lots of conversations, anytime you talk about public education, the role of teachers gets brought in. And sometimes, regrettably, I think they're used as scapegoats, and there's a blanket statement that, teachers aren't doing their job. Look, like any other profession, there are some who are absolutely fantastic and great, and some, quite frankly, who aren't very good, like any other profession.
Absolutely.
But to call them out, I think, is ridiculous. I think other than a parent, that teacher in the classroom with that child every day is going to have the biggest influence on their success in life, and all we're suggesting, all the task force is suggesting, is how do we ensure we have the highest quality teachers in front of those children each and every day?
That is correct. And to turn it on the parents' side now, there are recommendations in the Transition Task Force document that call for a lot more focus on parental involvement, on family involvement for those children. Things like visiting, home visits, and things of that nature. I mean, these are things that are different or bold for our district, for things that maybe we did at one point, but we haven't consistently done those things. We have got to figure out the way to get parents involved in the education of their children.
Right.
They have to be an integral and active part and a supportive part. And that's been a very challenging thing with the transient population that we have in the district. So that transience and things of that nature, we're coming to grips with that this district is unique in a lot of ways for that and has to address that kind of thing with the parents.
All right, as we come to a close here, the recommendation from the task force, a hybrid board of directors that takes in, yes, both the local voice and retainage of some of the existing board members for knowledge of community institutional memory, wraparound services, knowing that the families that live in our community and send their kids to schools have some challenges that certainly can be addressed, but they need the resources delivered to them in a coordinated and comprehensive way. Parental engagement, parental involvement, and teacher training. Again, all things that, quite frankly, none of them are news flashes in terms of what's happened. Here's the challenge for our community. Can we get it done?
That's right. And we have no choice. We have to get it done. We have 3,000 to 4,000 children who deserve better than what they have been getting from
all of us.
So we've got work to do. We just have to get it done. There is no choice as far as I'm concerned.
All right. You heard it there. Task force member, mayor of the city of Greendale, community leader, community volunteer, Miss Monica Huddleston. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Reliance Bank is pleased to sponsor today's Going Beyond radio show. With 20 locations throughout the St. Louis area, Reliance Bank, your locally owned hometown bank, is making money a little friendlier.
Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
We're going beyond.
Going Beyond is a presentation of Beyond Housing, helping entire communities become better places to live with RareGem Productions. Proudly promoting, presenting, and producing positive programming.
Neighborhood is where you live, and we want to keep it strong and vibrant. This is Chris Krehmeyer with Beyond Housing. We are going beyond.
Chris Krehmeyer, President and CEO of Beyond Housing. Located at 4156 Manchester, phone number 314-533-0600. The only organization in the St. Louis region that offers access to affordable housing. Wherever we work, our goal is to help transform people, families, and communities so that they achieve the skills, strategies, resources, and commitment to succeed for the long term. See our work at beyondhousing.org. Podcast for Going Beyond can be heard, downloaded, and shared by visiting hallelujah1600.com. Listed under the music tab, on demand. Going Beyond is another positive production of RareGem Productions.